my countrymen. This is Eli Velislao Pamatong, Republic of the Philippines. And once again tonight I have come to share with you burning issues concerning the country and in some ways concerning the world community. Is the answer to why China, the Chinese, are immigrating to other countries. What they do in those countries and what those countries have done to control Chinese migration. But before I proceed to my main topic, I would like to talk to you about human nature, the nature of all living things. Hitler once said, rightly, that life is an everlasting struggle where one creature feeds on the other and where death of the weak implies life for the strong. Yeah, it's one creature feeding on the other, and the death of the weak means life for the strong. As Senator Claro M. Recto once said, the life of man, the world, is a vast, vast battlefield where one nation may be lost to history and will become a memory. Several nations in the world have already become memories. And I pray to Bathala that the Philippines will not be one of them. Let me recall to you what is no longer in the map of the world. The territory of Morisnet between 1816 to 1920, the Republic of Salo between 1943 to 1945, Tibet 1912 to 1951, when the Dalai Lama escaped from Tibet, the United Arab Republic 1958 to 1971, Sikkim in India 1642 to 1975, Ceylon 1505 to 1972. It's now Sri Lanka. Czechoslovakia 1918 to 1993, and East Germany 1949 to 1990. There were other countries not mentioned here, like Israel. During the diaspora, when the Romans scattered all the Jews in different corners of the world in protest or as punishment for the revolution against Rome under Vespasian. Well, the Jews actually were roaming around the world for 1,000 years until they were able to go back to Palestine, which was occupied with the Arabs. Palestine means land of the Jews, but it became land of the Palestinians for a long time because of the diaspora triggered by Roman cruelty. And so nations can be lost to history. And China, of course, split, but the mainland China is still there. From 1959 to 1960, about 76 million Chinese were lost in the so-called Great Leap Forward. 76 million. Marami na yan. 76 million. That's almost the size of the population in the Philippines about 10 years ago. Some of the images of the victims of the famine in China. malubha yung famine sa Thailand. Too many died. People were as thin as you could imagine, skin and bones. And the only living things that were fat in China were the dogs, because there was no time to bury the dead ones. And the dogs were very happy, happy to be feasting on the dead bodies of the Chinese. Ethiopia, yun, almost wiped out by famine. About 1 million Ethiopians suffered. And the trees were leafless. Walang dahon, kinakain yung dahon nila. But 1 million died in spite of that. Russia, about 8 million died in Russia because of famine. The famine that drove Chinese to go around the world. I'm mentioning about the other countries that faced famine. But I think the Russians did not go around like the Chinese to escape famine. And there were 8 million Russians who died, according to Khrushchev, a former prime minister, primer of Russia. The Russians went to the extent of eating their children. Well, that's in the Old Testament. They literally eat their children because they cannot survive without eating their children. Stalin got all the food from the farmers, brought the food to the front lines to support the soldiers who are fighting Germany. So about 8 million. Would you imagine 8 million? How many people are 8 million dying in Russia? I have some photos of that here. In the Russians, so 8 million of these Russians. 8 million. And many were eating each other to survive. These are the Ethiopians. Kumakain na lang ng dahon para mabuhay. And the trees were leafless. Some were just opening their mouth. As long as they can open their mouth, hoping that flies will enter the mouth, and they would just close their mouth so they have some food to eat, the flies. Life can be very cruel. Very, very cruel. And that is why, because of starvation, people like the Chinese, especially the Chinese, there are a lot of Chinese in the world, maybe about 2 billion. You count 4 persons, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth is always a Chinese. That's how many there are. There was a time when they implemented the one Chinese policy, a one-child policy, and it somewhat controlled the population. But what happened was that there were too many men and very few women. So even right now, the parents of the males are courting the parents of the females that are still being conceived, because they could hardly find a woman in China. I hope the Filipinos will go there, because there are too many women in the Philippines. Plus the bayots, the bakla, well, that doubles the number of feminine characters in the Philippines. Only very few men. That is what's going on in China. And again, to repeat, 76 million died in China because of the great leap forward under the leadership of Pamatong. Mao Zedong, I'm sorry, Mao Zedong. Now it's being pronounced as Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong. I mentioned my name because there was a time when I was kind of proud to hear about Mao Zedong. It rhymes with Pamatong, but now it's pronounced as Mao Zedong. Like the Battle of Yoltong, it's pronounced now as Yoldong. They keep changing their pronunciation. But anyway, it's okay. I am now Eliberis Pamadong. Anyway, there are many Chinese in a lot of countries. Let me mention some of these countries. In Canada, there are about 2 million Chinese. In Indonesia, 7 million, 7 to 8 million in Indonesia. In Malaysia, 7 million Chinese. In Thailand, 7 million Chinese. In the Philippines, it used to be 1 million, 900,000 to 1 million. But after the Gong entered the Philippines, I mean the leadership of the Philippines, it became about 4 to 5 million Chinese in the Philippines already. I think it's because of the plan of China to reduce the Philippines into a province of China through Puppet Duterte. So maraming inchik na ngayon. It used to be about 1 million. Now it's 4 to 5. And maybe because there's constant entry of Chinese through the northern back door, it could even be 10 million. Just like during the Spanish era, where there were about 10 million Chinese in the Philippines. Now, how did other countries, or how do countries control the aliens in their homeland? Well, the worst form of control was made by Hitler when he interned about 6 to 8 million Jews and roasted them inside the internment camp. The oven, a huge oven were made, and they were killed. It was one way of controlling aliens by Germany. And Canada, where they passed the exclusion law, where the Chinese cannot enter Canada because there were many Chinese coming in. And then in America, there was also exclusion law in America to control the Chinese. Only Chinese males were welcome. Most of the women were not welcome in America at that time, unlike today. And so there are many ways of controlling aliens. Like in China right now, the Uyghurs, about 2 million Uyghurs are in the internment camp. They are being forced to work. They are being raped. But that's the way of Chinese control of foreign elements. And actually, the Uyghurs are not foreigners in China. They are natives of a part of China. But they are considered foreigners or aliens because they are not really the Chinese that we know. They are near the area of Uzbekistan, Pakistan. They are in that marginal area of China. And so the Chinese are building in thousands, hundreds of thousands of internment camps. And the Uyghurs are confined there and they are forced to work. They cannot get out because they are Muslims. They are being trained to believe in the Chinese way of life. The Chinese are not in favor of Islam. And also the Chinese are not in favor of Christianity. The Christian churches there are being burned. And that is also one way of controlling the entry of Christians into China. In Malaysia, they had this principle of Bumi Putra. Bumi Putra. It's actually a policy to give preference to the businesses or the projects of the natives, the Bumi Potera, for short, Bumi Potra. So they have this Bumi Potra policy to equalize the opportunity of the Chinese and the natives, or prefer the natives over the Chinese. Bumi Potra policy. It's similar to Carlos P. Garcia's Filipino First policy. There was a time when we have this person from Bohol named Carlos Mulistico Garcia. He became president and he advanced the Filipino First policy over all other nationalities. I think it was because of the parity rights agreement with America, where the Americans can exploit anything in the Philippines, all the natural resources, and the Filipinos can do the same. But it was not practical because the Filipinos had no capital to go to America, go around America and look for minerals there. Anyway, there was this Filipino first policy of Carlos P. Garcia that give preference to Filipino businessmen. In Indonesia, the kind of control was different. I will explain that later. About 3 million were massacred in Indonesia in the guise of controlling political parties or the government in favor of democracy. But actually, it became a dictatorship. First, it was a guided democracy under Sukarno, and then later on, it became a dictatorship for 30 years under Suharto. So, the way to preserve democracy, so supposed to be democracy, they massacred about 3 million Chinese. The rivers in Indonesia were red of Chinese blood. They were killed everywhere they were seen. The women were raped in the elevators. The women were raped in the streets. There was no law against the Chinese. The only law is that you kill Chinese. And that was allowed. I have some photos here for you to see. These are some Chinese tortured in Indonesia. Well, the Indonesian leader said it's wrong, but we have to do it to survive, because the Chinese were in control of, practically in control of Indonesia through the Partido Comunista of Indonesia. That was the biggest party, third biggest party in the world, the Partido Comunista ng Indonesia. It was so big. There were a lot of Chinese there, millions of Chinese. So they had to stop that party from controlling Indonesia with the help of the CIA. Now, the communists in Indonesia were, of course, helped by Russia and China, because it happened during the Cold War. So the CIA was behind it, although I think the CIA was not involved in the massacre. They were observers. I think they knew. They are too, I would say, too good to not to know. So they knew the massacre in Indonesia. I had a lot of pictures of that. Here are Chinese in Indonesia. Their necks are tied like carabaos and pulled to their places where they were, to the place where they were massacred also. These are Indonesians hung on the tree, like tamduli. Hang down your head, tamduli. I have a lot of pictures here, but there would be no need to show all of them. I just want to demonstrate some photos of the past that have been forgotten because probably of a lot of things that we have to do every day. These are the Uyghurs of, I think I showed this already, Uyghurs of China. Millions of them are being interned and forced to work, and they are trained in the Chinese way of life. They are being re-educated and made to forget Islam. They are being brainwashed again and again into believing that their way of life is not good, is bad. So we have a lot of approach made by different countries on how to control immigration in their countries. Now, why are Chinese going to other countries? Well, you know, survival. They go to other countries like Canada, Thailand, Vietnam, not really because They want to help the host country. No, they want to survive. And they come to the Philippines not because they want to help the Philippines. They want to survive. That's why they migrate to other countries. And because they are very good in business, they normally become the employers in the country where they go to, like in the Philippines. After 70 years, the Filipinos have become muchacho, muchacha, jardinero, jardinera, bodyguards, security guards, drivers. Well, as I used to say, they become midwives, wives at daytime. I mean, maids at the daytime and wives in the evening. Midwife, like that. Very sad. But of all countries that are being, I would say, that have become a part of China in a sense that they are there, residing in that country, the Philippines is their favorite, the Philippines. And so what they're doing is that they lend money to the Philippines, a lot of money. In fact, they have been lending money throughout the world, about 22 countries. They they gave about 22 countries loans. In Africa, Sri Lanka, as a matter of fact, Sri Lanka right now is having a problem because the Sri Lankans made their port, very big port, collateral, and the Chinese took over because the Sri Lankans cannot pay the loan from China. And that is also a problem in the Philippines because unlike other countries, unlike Sri Lanka, only the port was made collateral for the loan. The Philippines, we have gone very far. We made the islands at the West Philippine Sea collaterals. The 800 major shoals and sandbars have been collateral the loans that we borrowed from China, about $167 billion, which could balloon to $500 billion. In all, in peso, in terms of peso, that's about maybe 10 trillion pesos. That's how much we're indebted. And if we could not pay, then they will say we are justified to get all of the West Philippine Sea Islands, which I would not sell for even $1,000 trillion. It's priceless. But in the Philippines, no, we don't control migration in the Philippines. We don't control China like they did in Indonesia or they did in Canada or in America. Sometimes in America, the Chinese were shocked by holding rallies when they held rallies against the American government for paying them too low. So they were shocked. But in the Philippines, it's different. We want the Philippines province of China. Instead of paying our debt, we hope that the debt will be foreclosed. So the Philippines will be owned by China and will become a province of China. That's the most painful part. Of all countries in the world, I think only the Philippines has decided to make the islands as collateral for the loan, the massive loans that the Chinese are giving the Philippines. Masakit. And there were other forms that I mentioned in the past on how the Chinese really wants desperately to control the Philippines. Initially, they had this massive migration from the time of the Spaniards even to the present. Then they had these business operations, which resulted in all of shopping malls, shopping centers, the best homes, the best cars, subdivisions, airlines, shipping lines, land transportation industries, basic arteries of commerce. They want the Philippines to own, to be a part of China so much that they are sending their nationals to the Philippines to engage in business and to buy lands from Filipinos who would like to sell lands to the Chinese. So migration, business operations, we have drugs. I call that chemical warfare. Now I think under the command of Duterte, then actual occupation of the West Philippine Sea by China. They are in control. In fact, you know that you cannot. The Philippine Navy has been threatened when they attempted to enter the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines to tell the Chinese to get out. The Philippine Navy, I think, was so afraid that they got out of the area, including the Philippine Air Force. So that's it. Bribery, that is one of the ways of China, the means of China to control the Philippines. Bribery of generals, busog na busog ang mga generals. Creation of local puppets, support of local puppets in politics. And the senators, the congressmen, those running for the presidency, being controlled. And to repeat, massive loans coupled with biological warfare, the coronavirus. They are resorting to all conceivable means to control the Philippines and make the Philippines a province of China. That's why the maybe Gong, puppet president, he was never elected, and you know that. We don't have to debate on that because he himself said he was not properly elected. So to repeat, the worst part about the Philippines is that unlike other countries, the Philippines is making its islands as collateral for the mass. And these islands here, these are very, very important islands. Given a chance to rise to the highest limit of power in the Philippines, I will not sell this island for $1 trillion or 1,000 trillions. No, I think no one has the right to sell what God has given to the Filipino people. According to Manuel L. Quezon, the Philippines, I repeat, I've been saying this many times, the Philippines is your country. The only country God has given you. You must protect it for yourselves, for your children and your children's children until the world is no more. We cannot, I would say, mortgage any of it. We cannot make any of the islands collateral for our loans from China. But we are doing it. The Sri Lankans, no, they did not collateralize Sri Lanka. What do you think if the Americans will collateralize New York for the $1 trillion that Americans borrowed from China? The Americans are indebted to China for $1 trillion. And so are the Japanese. They are also indebted to the tune of $1 trillion. Trillion, hindi lang billion. The Japanese and the Americans are indebted to China for $1 trillion, more than 1 trillion each. Why? Because the Chinese are really very good in business. And the Africans, many are indebted. All in all, about 22 countries are indebted to China. And that is a death trap. They call it death trap. Death trap. Kamatayan. Kasi pag hindi mo nabayaran yung loan, kinukuha yung bansa mo. Pati yung mga tao kinukuha. Parang doon sa Treaty of Paris, where the Philippines was sold by Spain to the Americans for $20 million. And there were 20 million Filipinos at that time, so even the Filipinos were bought by the Americans for maybe $2 per person at a time. So that's what's going on. I hope what happened in Indonesia will not happen in the Philippines, where there was ethnic cleansing against the Chinese. Well, there was political reason behind that, but of course, at the same time, the basic underpinning of that attack against the Chinese in Indonesia was the fact that the natives did not like what the Indonesians were doing in Indonesia. They were in control of the basic arteries of commerce, like what they are doing in the Philippines. What the Jews did in Germany. You know, the Jews practically controlled the economy of Germany, the economy of Spain. And in retrospect, that was the reason why, partly the reason why there was Inquisition that resulted to the deaths of about 100 million people, mostly Jews. And so the ethnic cleansing of Indonesia was not really, I would say, genocide. They call it politicide. Politicide. It was caused by politics, but there was something behind that. The natives' hatred against the Chinese. I hope that will not happen in the Philippines. And so, to prevent the Chinese from being massacred like what happened in Indonesia, or to prevent the Chinese from being massacred like what happened in Germany, I proposed the war, the immediate attack against China, and the creation of internment camps to protect the Chinese citizens here. The immediate attack of China to solve this problem in the Philippines. Because if we do not solve this problem, we will lose this country. If we do not attack China, we must attack China. America cannot attack China. Japan will not attack China. Why? They are indebted to China. And they know that pursuant to the MAD policy, mutually assured destruction policy in international warfare, if they attack China, well, America can be destroyed also, because China has hypersonic planes, many times faster than sound, planes that are virtually invisible, just like the American fighter planes. And so America may not, I would say 99.9%, America will not attack China. Only the Filipinos at this time can save China. And the only solution that I could think of, if given a chance to rise to the highest level or peak of power in the Philippines, is to wage war against China immediately. And I can assure you, we will win the war. Do not believe in Digong Duterte who said we will lose the war. Isa lang putok, tapos tayo. No, we will win that war. We have shown and proven that beyond any shadow of doubt at the Battle of Yuldong. I keep on mentioning that because I'm proud with the Filipinos at the Battle of Yuldong, where 40,000 Chinese were routed by 900 to 1,000 Filipinos. We can do it again here. We can defeat the Chinese as we defeated the Japanese here in the Philippines. I repeat, there were 6 to 7 million well-armed, well-disciplined Chinese fighters in the Philippines against Filipinos who were armed with bolos, and rifles that were more dangerous to the users than to the enemy. Very old weapons. But we routed, we destroyed the army of the Japanese Empire, the invading army of Japan, the Imperial Army. We destroyed the army of the rising sun. Why? Because we were united, and we are among the best fighters in the world, according to General Lawton. Henry Ware Lawton said, when I saw Filipinos fighting in the trenches in the Philippines, jumping into the mouths of cannons, he said, oh my God, these are the bravest men I have ever seen. Coupled with the comment of MacArthur, when he saw the Filipinos fighting at the Battle of Yuldong, he said, he commented, give me 100 Filipinos and I will conquer the world. So you Filipinos are listening to me. Trust me, we can win the war against China. We are winners. We are winners. Kudarat won in all the battles in Mindanao. Lapu-Lapu won in the Battle of Mactan. Dagoy won in the battles of Bohol. We won in the battle against China, Spain, except that we were double-crossed by America. We won in major battles. We lost at Corridor, but it was not us who lost at Corridor. The Americans lost that. And when the Americans escaped to China, MacArthur, we fought toe-to-toe, belt-to-belt, and crushed and routed the Japanese Empire to shame, to humiliation. We can do it again. my only solution right now as true president of the Philippines, that if the armed forces of the Philippines will only support me, if the Philippine National Police, if the Filipino people will support me as your true president, their true president, I will wage war immediately. And I assure you, before God, before the august bar of history, that we will not only win, we will prevail in the coming war against China. And we have no choice. The only choice we have is to fight and win. I think I have said enough. Thank you and good night.
Tayo. Balon sila sa
Okay kayo sir.
Chinese.
Ikan din.
Ikan pa.
Ano? Sabay, kay short lang, oh. 20 lang. 20 ba? Kusog ba?
Sponsor ka ng 30 minutes, kapin?
Ha?
39 minutes po.
Okay.
Siguro na. Baka, ano na ang battery
Yeah.
na. Week
Nasira
na.
sa hira.
Baka week na.